think it is quite interesting to see that still today, even though we've been building so many mobile networks over the years, that there are still 50% of the world that is not covered when it comes to people of mobile internet or mobile internet penetration. That is 3 billion people that is still offline as of today. That is a real digital divide. But it's not only a digital divide. As everything goes digital, it is also an economic divide. This economic divide will remain until you actually build connectivity so that these societies, these individuals, these people, these SMEs that count for 90% of the global GDP can actually be connected and become a part of the digital society as well. If we don't solve these things, hearse inequalities will remain for the foreseeable future. But it is going to be solved. Not only the fact that we are being able to launch services out of the low orbit satellite system that is going to enable people as well as SMEs, as well as things, as ships, as planes, etc., to actually have high speed, low latency internet at 5G quality. It's also going to drive a tremendous economic growth beyond where mobile networks is building the growth today. You can actually see and view OneWeb's LEO network satellite service as a flying 5G network. I would say it's the first time you probably can see a satellite communication provider or satellite solution being able to provide services equally or better than the ones that can be produced and constructed and delivered on ground. Why is it important, and why are OneWeb pushing so hard on building this network and the network society for the future? It is very simple so that the overall value creation and the TAM that we are working on is worth some 23 billion annually. That is a massive amount of money, but it's also a massive amount of money creating growth in the society, increasing GDPs, enabling people and societies to actually become better equipped for the future of digitalization. As you might know, we have continued to build our network over the years, the last year, and we're shipping satellites step by step. And we're going to ship up, which is our next launch, which is Hello North Pole, which means that we're covering everything down to the 50th degree. That in itself is a fantastic achievement, but it also means that we're going to start being able to deliver services as of this year to remote areas in Alaska, Canada, northern Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Germany, parts of Germany, UK, etc. And as you might have seen, we also signed a contract with British Telecom to be able to help the unconnected parts of UK to be connected. This in itself is a paradigm shift. Historically, satellite business has been about capacity, but not low latency or high throughput. But with LEO constellations, you can actually deliver high throughput, low latency at any point and location anywhere in the world at any time. This is equal or as good as what you can find on ground, which becomes a cellular native solution. What is then going to be the key things that is important to think about going forward? I think it is when you're building these satellite solutions and these network solutions, it's actually that you start thinking about how do you distribute and how do you build this network into the future. And there we've chosen to be working with our partners, being telecom companies around the world. Most of you are probably already visiting GSMA as of today. Telecom operators are on the ground, are capable of delivering services, already delivering services, but with the use of a LEO network solution and a OneWeb solution in connectivity, you could add additional radio base stations to improve coverage and extend coverage on mobile internet and mobile data beyond where you are today delivering these services. The seamless experience that then can be occurring will deliver growth and enable new services, but also IoT functions in underdeveloped societies. Not only in the underdeveloped societies, but also in the future of the developed societies, meaning that if you want to digitalize, you will improve productivity across transport industry and have remote driving or remote flying or remote shipping. you actually need to have low latency, high bandwidth connectivity and capabilities. And that is possible with LEO satellites. I actually think that the overall LEO satellite concept as such is probably the first real paradigm shift to the connectivity market or connectivity space over the last 10, 15 years. I would say since you got data becoming disconnected from the 3G network when we launched 4G. And you actually were going into data services and you could create applications. Then in the future, you can imagine if you have these applications being possible to actually be launched onto any cloud network and you have a distributed cloud and compute capabilities, then satellites would actually be able to reduce latency to minimum. These, of course, latency reductions and the speeds that you can deliver through satellites, between satellites, will be significantly improving the overall experience for anyone doing communication anywhere in the world. What does it mean then to be doing LEO capabilities and LEO satellites? Well, it is actually a true global solution. And a true global solution is something that covers every piece of the globe. And LEO satellites are covering every piece of the world. As the constellation is being built up and modeled in such a way, we're adding the satellites until we have complete coverage all over the world. And we will have global services available in 2022, but we're launching the first services at the end of this year in 2021. And also at the end of 2022, we're adding mobility, which will be services for aviation and maritime as of Q1 2023. That means that you will be able to offer things that has not been experienced in planes or on ships as of today, but things that we take for granted when we're on in well-developed parts of the world, in cities and city centers where you have good connection, you have good bandwidth, you have high speed and low latency. So if you really look at what are the so to say positive yields that would come out of building a global mobile network or global satellite network with mobile capabilities, having LTE speed and high bandwidth, high throughput. I told you earlier on that the current estimated, so to say, total addressable market for LEO satellite businesses is some 23 billion annually in 2025, growing to some 50 billion by 2030 is the estimate. That is a significant amount of money, but it is also a significant amount of money that will enable GDP growth. So everyone that is being able to connect to the internet and connect to actually data speed and low latency will be able to start delivering more GDP growth to its country, to its town, etc., etc. So it is a catalyst for the spread of economic growth across a lot of countries and a lot of parts of the world where you don't have this today. But it's also an enabler for digitalizing things that are already important today in mines, in remote locations, for farming, for forests, etc., and shipping. So what do we think will be really the groundbreaking things that will happen? So it's as always when you launch services, it's not necessarily so that you know for sure what is going to be the key transformative moves. But the fact that if you look at the history, that everywhere where you've added data and LTE capabilities, you've had GDP growth, you have had digital improvements, and you have had and seen significant uptake in productivity. And of course, this will mean that you will see the same when you add this into areas where they never have had digital experiences. But it also means that people that are outside the digital experiences today, and if you remember where we were before COVID started, it was still difficult to actually have video meetings. A lot of people say, well, you cannot do business without video. Not steer or operate business without going there, to a certain extent at least. Today, that is fully accepted, and it's going to be even more accepted in the future. But it also means that a lot of places where you might not have been able to receive education, or you haven't been able to receive information, you will be able to receive that information in an equal good way as people in developed parts of the world are. And this will, of course, mean that the digital divide will shrink and inclusion will happen. And for us, we have a passion about that, and we are actually very passionate about that. We're not only here for building connectivity for the purpose of making sure that things and people are being connected, but it also has a passion for actually closing the digital divide and improving the overall global experience for people so that they can join the digital society. I think this being here today, of course, it's great fun to be here talking. I've been to the Mobile World Congress all since the days it was in Cannes. That sounds like a very, very long-lasting relic of the telecom industry. But I've been moving around between now latest satellite, but before that, equipment provider like Ericsson. I think following the development from the very early days of 2G up until today and what is happening, I think we are really seeing the things happening dramatically now when we're letting the leashes go. If there is really no limitations any longer in enabling things to become digital, as you can create private LTE networks in combination with LTE networks. You can have seamless handovers between these networks, and you can also have seamless handovers between things, which of course means that all these capabilities together has been starting to build a completely new digital society. And I think the reality is that when you start adding the areas and the spaces around the world that is not covered, you will also see these be included. And they will start. Because if you don't have had any legacy of the history, being you have an analog setup or something, you will go directly. We see this in other areas, for example, like in mobile money and mobile payments, where you jumpstart directly into a future technology-proof solution. You will see the same when you're actually adding LTE capabilities to areas of the world where they haven't had this. And you can do that in a very efficient, seamless way. And I think satellite and low-flying LTE networks will be the ones that will enable this amazing and very, very, what I would say, fantastic development for these areas. Because once these applications that we are used to run and used to use in our daily life will actually come into societies where they don't have an analog history or an analog history to bring into the future, they can go digital direct. And that will, of course, enhance growth, but it also will be possible to do and deliver education in a completely new way. So all in all, I think OneWeb is an amazing enabler for future growth, but it's also an amazing enabler for reducing inequalities and making sure that we can include and get more people to join the digital world that we want to live in, and that we can create growth and a better society and a better place where you actually will be able to see not only improvements in the daily life of all of us, but also improvements in the daily life of people who is not connected. So it includes the non-included as of today. It improves the mobile networks capabilities so that you can actually build mobile networks without having the cumbersome process of either using free line of sight or fiber connectivity that can be both costly and very difficult to deliver to certain points. Just of a sudden, you will be able to drop down LTE base stations or 5G base stations, and in the future 6G as well, and enable fantastic services from anywhere on Earth. And of course, we will also enable direct connectivity to a lot of vehicles, a lot of different industries. And in combination with what I would say really key partners, being the telecom operators around the world, we will be rocking the boat and changing the borders of where we used to do connectivity in the past. That will mean that you will see telecom operators benefiting from LEO satellite operators that they haven't seen in the past, but it also will be beneficial to the future of the industry as LTE networks will be combined with satellite backhauling capability. I think there's not really anything that has been changing or so transformative from a network technology point of view as adding additional coverage. Because whatever solutions, whatever technology you want to develop, if you cannot really reach the users, it doesn't make any sense. And with Leo, you're actually reaching 3 billion more users. And 3 billion more users is massive. And on top of that, as developing societies are moving into digital societies, also underdeveloped societies can move in, and 3 billion people can be integrated by LEO satellites into this. And the harsh inequalities that we see as of today will actually disappear. And on top of that, which I think is actually key, the overall life for all human beings will become better as digitalization will be a possibility, not something that is in the way any longer, and something that is not reachable for certain parts of the society. And I personally do really feel passionate about being a part of delivering these services and being a part of OneWeb, being part of changing things that has not been changed in the last 20, 30 years with mobile telephony. And we will see that the digital divide will shrink, and the digital divide will not any longer at the end of this journey be an issue, but actually an opportunity. So with these words, I would like to hand back to our dear leader or person who sorts out the conference, and then I will be happy to take on any questions you might have or any thoughts you might have about my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Per. Much appreciated, sir. I can assure you I'm certainly not somebody who sorts out the conference, but I can help facilitate this session. I interviewed a chap called Dr. Stephen Klasko, who runs a big sort of healthcare organisation in America. And we were talking about the pandemic and the impact this has had, and the move towards telehealth, obviously, which grew enormously in the US over the pandemic. And he raised a really interesting point, I think, which was that what became apparent in that move towards telehealth was that connectivity now was a very real and very genuine social determinant of health. You know, if you couldn't connect to the doctors, then this is a real disadvantage. And I'm wondering, you know, with everything you talked about there, about kind of bridging that economic divide, that digital divide, I'm wondering who you think should be responsible for these things and how that looks.
So I actually think that the responsibilities, if you look at telehealth, I think that telehealth is happening across any connectivity. Then connectivity is something that I do think that politicians and societies needs to enable. In the mobile world, that is enabled by giving out licenses and frequencies or selling these frequencies on a time-based manner to be able companies to build infrastructure to create connectivity. In the satellite world, there is investors, but also, of course, authorities and the countries standing behind these developments, enabling these things. And ultimately, I think the coverage requirements and the investments in making sure that everyone is included in a country is up to the politicians in that country. And if incentivized right, the market will actually handle that itself. So investments will happen if it's incentivized in the right way. If not incentivized, areas where it makes sense commercially to do it will happen. But I do think if you go back to the early days of mobile telephony, it was not incentivized, and you had a fairly limited coverage, but still the business took off. I think the major change here with LEO satellites, for example, which enables possibilities very quickly, is that rapidly you cover the whole globe, covering every single human being within a couple of years. LTE networks has taken or mobile networks has been taking us since late 80s, early 90s, cover 50% of the population with LTE or data connectivity. And here you can actually cover 100% within a fairly short period of time. So I think just the bare fact that you're adding 3 billion more people to the possibility to be connected in itself is a huge business opportunity for everyone that is in this communication industry, which will enable, of course, further growth. And telehealth will be a part of it. If you connect people, they will be able to use services like telehealth.
Of course, and so you talked about, the incentives need to be aligned. Do you feel that with what you're doing here, that this is, right, we're going to take a punt, we're going to put it up, we're going to open up this market of 3 billion because we know that 3 billion is a heck of a market? Or do you feel like right now the incentives are aligned? This is a safe and not just a clever and brave and noble thing to do, but this is a safe investment. It's a good thing for us to do.
So I would really think that this is a good investment. Absolutely, I think it's a brilliant investment, and it's brilliant from 2 points of view. One is, of course, financially, because there's a TAM out there that is from 25 billion growing to some 50 billion US dollars, which is in itself a massive amount of money. Then that's the business opportunity. But then of course there is another angle of this, and that is the fact that you can enable new services to areas and people that has not been able to get these services in the past. So you're actually broadening your service area. It's not only about covering people, but also covering places and land masses. And there is for sure loads of value in doing that. And you could see, for example, cooperation between telecom operators, vessel operators, private LTE networks, factories, mines, remote locations. You can have a lot of, if you take telehealth, the low latency possibilities with LTE networks in combination with satellite networks, of course, means that you could do a lot of remote health checks that might not be possible today with very long latency or low latency requirements not being met.
Yeah, of course. And we have a question from Dimitri in the chat, Per, and he says, just to make sure I've got this correct, he says, it used to be that the infrastructure, typically the ground infrastructure was less costly than satellites, et cetera, Has that changed as technology has moved on?
For sure. I wouldn't be able to say. I mean, it's a very it's a difficult question to answer that simple. What you can say is that the cost per produced gigabyte or megabit per second has dramatically dropped down when you look at LEO versus GEO and MEO satellites. So of course you have a significant improvement in the total cost of ownership, but also in the cost of production. Then the history of mobile networks and ground-based equipment is, of course, based on the fact that you have a significant already built-out platform in terms of fiber networks, electricity networks, power supply, towers, etc., etc. So I don't think it is necessarily only that easy, and you also need to add cost of licenses and frequencies to be able to compare. Then for sure, in areas where you have low or poor availability of fiber, you have maybe poor availability of free line of sight, and of course, satellite becomes a significant improver of communication. And I don't think that land versus satellite they are probably a combination of both that is going to be building the most valuable future asset. So see this as a low-flying LTE network with the possibilities to pick up a lot of traffic to enable new services in new areas where they haven't been possible before.
That's fantastic stuff. Thank you very much indeed. You've described this technology as a paradigm shift in connectivity. Where does it go from here, do you think? What's the direction of travel?
So, well, it's probably going to be even more transformative going forward when you add more capacity and you start communicating between the satellites in space. You are reducing latency to zero, and you can have real-time information available in two spots at the very same time. That, of course, is a significant improvement to what is available today, where you have a lot of latency. It also has a lot of security implications, where you have end-to-end possibilities to communicate, where you cannot where you pass through a lot of number of networks on the way to deliver something today. So satellite has possibilities to add both speed as well as capacity, but also security beyond what you've seen in the past. And I think this, in combination with mobile networks on the ground, will be a very, very positive contribution to additional connectivity, both in terms of speed as well as in terms of coverage.
And what do you think are the kind of the low-hanging fruit or the sort of table stakes, I suppose, for an LEO network? And what are the kind of, I was going to say moonshots, which feels like a particularly apt way to describe it. But what are the big hits? What would you hope for, and what do you think are these are the things it needs to do, and this is what I would love it to be able to do?
Yeah. Well, but you can start with looking at in countries like both Canada, US, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, all European countries, there are significant remote locations with extremely valuable assets that is being either through mines or other measures being taken out of our grounds, which needs to be connected. That would be improving significantly. You have on both military as well as non-military merchant ships and shipping industry, where people are out for months without being able to have real-time connectivity possibilities, doing FaceTime whenever they want, etc., which might not be such a big thing, but imagine yourself being only able to do FaceTime when you're in the harbor. Well, if you're out for 6 months, and your family is back home. The fact that you could add that and actually have the possibility to have a video call with someone is, of course, a significant improvement of quality of life being a sailor. That's one thing. Then you have education, which actually can be happening in areas that are remote today that is too expensive. Because even if you would be capable of building, fiber, etc., connectivity to these remote locations, the cost is too massive. And by putting a satellite node there, you would actually be able to provide these services at high quality at a very low and very efficient cost.
Absolutely, yeah. And
there is low-hanging fruit everywhere, I think. There is also, of course, 3 billion people, which is a massive. If you could add the same data usage with these 3 billion people over the coming 20 years, then imagine the growth of communication industry. We're at the beginning of an enormous journey.
Yeah, of course, and it's like anything, isn't it? You don't know what the moonshots can be, because someone brilliant's going to come along and look at that network and go, wow, we can now achieve this with this, and et cetera, et cetera. How has the pandemic affected the pace of change that you have observed? Has it tilted more providers towards your solutions? Has there been an impact?
What we've noticed is that there's first, you could say actually two things. I think the acceptance of digital has rapidly improved over the last 1.5 years. So people accepting digital solutions, digital meetings, digital calls, etc., in a completely different manner than they used to. So there's a very high degree of acceptance that I think is very healthy. But that, of course, means that this will remain, and you will expect the same experience everywhere. So I think what we've seen is a substantial uptake in requests for how to actually improve people coverage, not necessarily only surface, but people coverage in developed countries, where they see that if we can have significantly improved speed, significantly improved reduced latency, and throughput, improved throughput, then we will actually be able to provide better services to our citizens. And that is something we've really been able to see a lot of request and demand for, both from companies as well as society.
And what about the challenges? And I think maybe it's useful to break these down into two, because I think there are largely two sort of buckets for challenges. So let's look at people and let's look at technology. Very quickly, we'll cover off the technology challenges, because you're launching rockets into space. It feels like you've probably got those nailed. But what are the kind of the obstacles that you still have to get across in the tech front?
So as always, when you're launching something new and a new service, then of course there are potential risks when you do this. Then the satellite as such, we are seeing fantastic speeds, and on all tests with our user terminals, we have an amazing high degree of functionality. We are feeling very confident for our launch. Then of course well, any network, any business that is launching new services will of course in the very first of this have some challenges, things you haven't been thinking about. But overall, it's a very stable network, a very stable service as of today, and we are adding more satellites, and we're very confident in that we will deliver a very high service. But I wouldn't be too concerned about the technology per se. Then of course, getting all contracts, all user terminals, all the logistics around it is always a challenge. When you start something new, to get everything working, getting everyone educated, getting everyone being aware what to do, when and how, etc. But we will solve that.
Yeah, well, that's the bit that would be interesting to kind of hear about, I suppose. We've only a couple of minutes left, but I am curious about, it needs adoption. You clearly have a role within the company to sort of drive that adoption. What is the approach? So I suppose, is the largest problem education? And B, how are you working to counter and solve for that?
I think that you mean by around with our customers, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that there is. You know what? I don't think that you don't really have that much of a challenge with education. Most people are actually saying, "Please, when can we start?" And we are in detailed discussions. We signed a number of contracts, and we're continuing to negotiate a number of more contracts. We will be having quite substantial take up directly when we launch our first services. So the challenge is, I think, as always, is to actually figure out the best way to actually marry the supplier and the customer, and understand where are the benefits for the buyer and the seller, and how should these things be balanced, because we are trying things out. We don't know, as well as they don't know, what is the usage going to be, how is the usage model going to look like, what is going to be the different applications that are going to be run or being put up on top of this, and how is this going to develop. That I think is, there's a number of unknowns, but we all know that if you add high throughput, low latency to any area or any person, their data consumption rockets, and the application usage goes up, and the new innovation around this comes, with the speed of light, because people innovate when they can and simplify. I mean, humans have been doing that as long as we've been around.
Yeah, of course. And what's the feedback loop look like to the customers there? So, as things improve, as you learn more sort of things, what does that feedback loop look like?
We have set up both. We have an advisory board, meaning that we have customers and becoming customers, seeing people in these companies working with us, where we are vetting things, figuring out what to do. Then going forward, we're also going to have user groups, meaning that the existing users that have started to use our services will be participating in user group forums, where we'll be collecting information and understanding and learning so that we can improve, with the aim of being the number one provider of satellite-based services on Earth.
Lovely. And what gives you, we're talking about the overall theme of this whole thing, of course, is that sort of the massive seismic change that's going on in telco right now. What gives you cause for optimism, Per?
So I think that if you look at what the pandemic really made, that has given us all the opportunity to wake up to the importance of digital and digital possibilities. So I think that is one driver, and I think we're going to see massive digital growth, double digital growth coming out of when we are going out of this pandemic, which has been a tremendous difficult period for people getting used to addressing life in a completely different way. But the digital part has really saved us in a very large extent. And I think that will drive growth furthermore than we are seeing today. But it also will enable people to live in a completely different way going forward. And that, I think, is really going to drive consumption. Secondly, I do think the fact that if you can include 3 billion people, and if you can really start covering parts of the world with services that is not covered today, there will be usage for these, because people are traveling, people are there, people need these services, but also our Earth need these services to be able to improve quality of life. So I think all in all, mobile networks and digital services has probably been some of the best things that happened to us, because it has really enabled a lot of growth without having a major impact on the global society. But adding satellite on top of this will include and improve another significant part of the surface and 3 billion people.
Per, thank you very much indeed, sir. Have a great rest of the event, great rest of the day. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.